Hey guys, hope you've enjoyed all of our awesome 90s week programming this week. We're going to wrap it all up today by going around the office and talking to everybody about their favorite TV shows from the 90s.
So definitely one of my favorite shows in the 90s is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is a great show. It's what made Joss Whedon the huge titan of geekdom. There've been supernatural shows before, like The X-Files a few years earlier, like Kolchak, but really this kind of brought it into this big team-based thing. It made it fun. It also revolutionized horror and comedy on TV also in a way that hadn't really been done to that extent. And it went on for like 7 seasons. It even became comic book form. Buffy is probably the best original comic book character that wasn't from a comic book first, except for maybe RoboCop. If you haven't seen Buffy, even though the first few seasons are a little rough because they don't have a lot of money, it doesn't matter because in the end of the day, great storytelling and great characters are really what entertainment TV is all about.
The best show in the 90s. That's not a question. It's The X-Files. Pretty much every single procedural ever invented ever is just derivative of The X-Files and NYPD Blue. The X-Files is clearly the best show of the 90s, right? It was Monster of the Week for a while, then it got really serialized and deep into the aliens conspiracies with the cigarette smoking man. We went from smoking it here to smoking it here. Nothing gets better than the partnership between Mulder and Scully, which happened completely platonic and then got real romantic, and everybody wanted it to get romantic, and then it did, but not in like a cheesy, crappy Bones kind of way. There's really nothing bad to say about the show except for that one part when Scully went through her awkward religious phase, or the last 2 seasons when David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson didn't want to do the show anymore because it had gone on too long, so they replaced them with the Terminator 2 Terminator and that one girl that we all forget. And I think that was either really late in the 90s or maybe even in the 2000s, so maybe the 2000s ruined The X-Files. Still holds up as one of the best sci-fi shows ever. And it's completely streaming on Netflix, so I just am starting to rewatch the whole thing.
My favorite TV show of the 90s, I'm gonna have to say Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It may have been the unloved stepchild of the Star Trek franchise when it came out, but looking back on it in retrospect, it's probably the Star Trek show that has the highest average overall consistent quality, whereas a lot of other Star Trek shows kind of veered into the cheesiness. It had war, it had characters that weren't black and white, and it had a writing staff that went on to be responsible for Battlestar Galactica, for Alphas, for the 4400, for like half of everything I've loved since the 90s.
So one of my favorite shows from the 90s has to be The State. The early mid-90s had this amazing glut of sketch comedy because Saturday Night Live was doing kind of a rebirth, and so all of a sudden there was The State and Mr. Show. Kids in the Hall had been doing it for a little bit, but they started to really hit their stride. But the real standout in all of that sketch comedy for me was The State, and it gave us, you know, Thomas Lennon and Ben Garant and David Wayne, and all these guys have gone on to do amazing things and are still doing great work, you know, from Reno 911 all the way up to David Wayne's movies. Ken Marino is the funniest guy to scream ever. Just Ken Marino getting mad is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, The State came around for me at a very formative time in my life, and I think it informed a lot of what I've done creatively with my life. So I love The State, and it's from the 90s.
I would have to say the one I keep going back to on a rainy day and watching is The Adventures of Pete and Pete. It's just classic, and it's heartfelt and warm and taught me to be a big brother. So I go with that one.
One of my favorite shows from the 1990s actually premiered in 1999, but it only had 1 season, so it still counts. It's Judd Apatow's Freaks and Geeks. You've got the early careers of Seth Rogen, James Franco, Jason Segel, and my personal favorite, Bill, played by Martin Starr. Linda Cardellini leads as Lindsay Weir, and she's awesome. She's actually been in a bunch of things you probably didn't recognize her from. She's the permed daughter in Legally Blonde. She has an affair with Don Draper in Mad Men, and she's currently on New Girl as Jess's sister. If you haven't seen Freaks and Geeks, it's now streaming on Netflix. I promise you'll enjoy it.
There's just too much good stuff in the 90s. It's like trying to narrow down your favorite childhood memory. I mean, we didn't even get to Seinfeld, Friends, Wings, Ren and Stimpy, ER, My So-Called Life, Party of Five, Melrose Place, Beverly Hills 90210, or Felicity. So let us know what your favorite TV show of the 90s is in the comments below. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and come back next time for more movie news on CineFix Now.